Hello, everyone. I hope you are all online, and I'm pretty excited because this is our first session, and it is the only opportunity to talk to you people and maybe have a live conversation on certain topics that have been a kind of concern for us during this course. And if you know that this course was on interaction design, which meant that we were trying to understand how do we go about designing interactive products, and then we had seen that we begin by understanding first what is interaction design, and then one more precursor to that was what is interaction or what is interface. And in that sense, we begin pretty much in a logical manner by trying to understand first the very basic things that constitute an understanding of interaction design, and then we begin by then understanding the interaction design. So we saw a couple of definitions, and then we saw what would make sense in the most common way, and then we studied the relevance of goals in interaction design. So these were the first few sessions that we had together. Then, if you remember, from week 2 onwards, we were becoming more focused onto the process part of interaction design, and we paid emphasis on goal-directed design process. Okay, so I see that some of you are saying that my voice is echoing. Is that the case? How is it now? Is my voice, yeah. How's the case now? Am I clearly audible to you? Vishal? Okay, I assume that Vishal can hear me now. Okay. Oh, okay. So it's better now. Okay, thank you. So yeah, then the next thing that we were saying, but thank you, Arun. Thank you very much. Thank you. So we will go around the next phase of week 2. Week 2, if you say that we were becoming more focused onto the process of designing the interactive products, and we looked at the goal-directed design process. And there were different phases of this process. So from research phase to modeling to requirement definition to framework design, and then refinement, and then on to development support. We moved across an overview of these different phases. And then in the next week and onwards, we looked at different parts of these different phases in a greater detail. So if you can remember, we had a couple of sessions on just on research part, where we were dealing with how do we go about collecting data that would help us in the subsequent stages of this process. So we looked at quantitative analysis, subject matter expert interviews, user interviews, contextual inquiry sessions. And then we moved on to the modeling phase, which was the next phase that we had a detailed understanding about. And within that, we were looking at workflow models, user model, artifact model, physical model, 4 different models we looked at. And then, see, I'm giving you a brief overview because this is the only opportunity we had to kind of summarize the course together. So that's why I'm taking this time to give you a brief overview of the entire process. So when we were done with the research phase and modeling phase, we went on to the requirement definition phase. And then we saw that, those requirements were primarily divided into functional and non-functional requirements. And these requirements were more focused onto the functional elements and data elements and how they are structured and organized in the interface. And we detailed requirements which were with respect to the interaction, and which were with respect to the visual design part, and so on and so forth. And once we were done with the requirement phase, we moved on to the next phase, which was the phase of detailing the framework. And we looked at in great detail the interaction design framework. And then we had paid smaller attention slides to smaller. We paid according to the scope of the course, we paid a smaller attention to the visual design, and then subsequently to the industrial design framework. And then we moved on to the data design evaluation part. That was the last phase we had. So let me tell you a few things that would be important for us to note. The first one is that though it seems sequential, that one step comes only after the earlier step is finished. And then you are going in a sequence of following the design process in a particular stepwise manner. Okay, but at times, this is a very common thing, which is which most of my students ask. Do we need to take these as sequential steps all the time? So the answer to that question is that yes, of course they are detailed sequentially, because when it comes to learning the discipline, when it comes to learning this course, we have to go sequentially. But at times, some of these can go parallel. Okay, so for example, if you can imagine that when I was telling you that modeling, one of the essential activities in the modeling phase is the transcribing. And on that slide, one of the last point was that time of transcription is very, very critical. Okay, why we were saying that? Because as soon as you are done with the research phase or that particular activity, let's say contextual inquiry, you should begin the transcription, because you would end up losing a lot of data. Once again, we would use something like a pen or a diary, and then we would record our observations. But there were a lot of things which, as field researchers, as designers in the field, we would miss out. Okay, so we had understood this in terms of non-verbal cues and other things and other codes, which different users may have expressed, but due to certain limitations, we might not be in a position to make a record of. So that is why it is important to begin with transcription as soon as you have the data. So you see that these processes need not to go that sequential. Like it's not that you should finish the entire research and then move on to the modeling part. In fact, you could finish part of the research, then go to the modeling part, finish part of modeling, come back, and so on and so forth. So on a very practical note, these processes are sequential, as if like, of course, they would make sense to do modeling right after the research, but you should not give too much of time gap in between any two stages of this process. So at times they could be parallel. Another example could be when you are designing when you are designing the framework, let's say interaction design framework, you need not to wait for refinement phase to come. You can sequentially refine it. You finish up one activity, you detail one activity, and then you can refine it. Okay. So on a very practical note, some of these activities or parts of these activities can happen parallel. So that is something which okay, Narendra, when you say that there is any approximate time gap for these phases, okay. See, when it comes to time, I want to give you a very realistic idea of working in a team. See, most of these interactive products are commissioned by different people. So maybe there is a company which wants to make up design an interactive product. Okay, so timelines, as far as these different deadlines are concerned, that it's not just one variable that decides that deadline. Even the producer, even the company that has commissioned that project may have had some deadlines. Okay, so I wouldn't really go on and prescribe an absolute number for this time gap between different phases. It depends on whosoever is a client is, what is his requirement, and how our different resources are arranged with respect to the project. So it's a very real-time activity, and it's good to plan it out, as if like you can plan the sequence and you can plan the approximate time, but that again is a function of so many of these things. Okay, so from a theoretical perspective, I don't think that we have any approximate time gap for these phases. In fact, most of the time people are doing things in parallel. Okay, so in an industry setup, if you see within these goal-directed design processes, there are specialized people who just work on research part. Then there are specialized people who just work on the modeling phase. Then there are experts who just work on the framework design. Okay, so need not to be the case that there is a very absolute time in between these phases. Of course, you have to follow up on the outcomes of the earlier phase. So let's say the modeling follow up on the outcomes of the research phase, and the requirement follows up from the outcomes of the modeling phase. So that's a follow up. But I wouldn't prescribe any approximate absolute time gap for these phases. Okay, now comes the question of Barkha. Barkha, I think this question, that is there a difference, or what is the difference between user experience design and interaction design? This question is an interesting question, not because this is something which is so much talked about these days, but more so because I saw a lot of you posing this question. Okay, so as an instructor, this question seems very interesting to me. Now let us look at the difference between UX and interaction design. I think by the end of this course, you would have knowledge about the interaction design. So what is interaction design? That is something that was the crux and onus of this course. Okay, but when it comes to user experience design, and it is here that I would like all of you who are attending this live session to pay attention, okay? Because we are going a little out of the scope of the course, but I'm anyways going to tell you about user. Interaction design was very, very concrete in terms of it was very much objective, okay? It was very much objective in terms of what you should do, at what stage, what is the outcome, what is the process, very much objective, okay? But it was focused onto the interactive product. That's about it, okay? It was focused onto the design of the interactive product. Now, when it comes to user experience design, and people are still defining these terms in the industry and in academia, but a very common understanding of user experience design suggests that user experience is about all the aspects of using the product. What do you mean by all these aspects? Let me give you an example which is from the physical world, and then we will try to plot this example onto the interactive digital world. Okay. So assume that you are going to use a certain ATM, okay, and you are out in the city, and your wallet is run out of money and you want to go and use an ATM. Okay. So the user experience in this case would just be about the usability or the interaction design or the user interface of the ATM. It would be considering all the other aspects which are about the ATM, around the ATM, and about you as a user of the ATM. So it would be about the bank also. What kind of services is bank giving to you, right? It would be about the environment where the ATM is placed. So is there a guard? Is there a security person at the gate, or it's an unguarded entrance to the ATM? Within the ATM environment, is it a conducive environment? Do you see messages which have a positive tone or which have a constructive tone that would help you accomplish your task? And also, once you use the ATM and you come out of the ATM, how is your entire experience with the interactive artifact? So it's not just about the artifact per se. It is about all the other aspects, including the interaction design and the user interface aspects. Okay. So in that sense, user experience is a much wider term. Okay. And that was not the focus of this course. So it's a little out of the scope of this course. Primarily because when we were floating this course, we had this idea that whether we should begin with a course on user experience or a course on interaction design. And we realized that let us first focus on the specifics, and then we will go about connecting these different things. So that's why we proposed the first course, which was on interaction and user interface design. And then maybe in the next session, if I get feedback from some of you to have a course on user experience design, we will have that course as well. Okay, so let me begin with Barkha. Yeah, did I answer your question, or you have a follow-up question? If yes, you can ask me anytime during this session. I will come back and answer your question. Okay, now I am going to entertain a different question now. Okay, so Arunesh says that now that we have learned theory of interaction design through this course, how can we proceed ahead to apply it? Okay, I think that depends on. Am I still audible to everyone? I just want to cross-check once more. Am I still audible to everyone? Okay, great. Okay, so since we have learned the theory of interaction design through this course, one of the possible cases to begin and applying it would be dependent on your position. So if you are a student and maybe in your 4th year in your bachelor's or in your 2nd year in your master's, if you have a project that requires designing interactive artifact, then I would strongly encourage you to look into applying this theory, okay, applying learnings from interaction design. If you are an entrepreneur and you are trying to float a particular interactive artifact that requires you to borrow some of the learnings from interaction design, please go ahead and do that. At the same time, if you are employed somewhere and somewhere within your work environment or within your work responsibilities, you are required to design interactive artifact or even conduct, let's say, the research activities with respect to the interactive artifact or the modeling activity with respect to the interactive artifact. Any one of the activities or all of the activities from the goal-directed design process, then it would be a nice idea to proceed with the application of learnings from interaction design course. So how can you proceed ahead to apply it is actually a question that depends on your requirements as a learner. And I have listed few profiles before you. One of a bachelor's student, then another one of a master's student. Maybe someone with who is an entrepreneur, or maybe someone who is in a company working for others. So these are different profiles that are coming to my mind. And if you have any other profile, but somewhere you are required to design an interactive artifact, you are I would encourage you very much to apply the learnings from interaction design. Okay. So yeah, I think Dilshar was asking that is the final exam subjective or objective, and yeah, our team has posted reply to that. It's an objective type question. Now let me take up a different question. Okay, so Deepali says that if a customer specifies set of screen design, styles, frame, color, etc., which are to be counted as requirements, then what type of requirements they are? Okay, I think they are visual design requirements, isn't it? Because if you go for the visual design framework, pretty much which style you follow, what kind of layouts you consider, what is the color, or what is the brand strategy that the customer has in mind. These are all visual design requirements. Okay, so visual design requirements would correspond to the visual design of the interactive artifact. And I think the question is pretty much straightforward. It's a visual design requirement. Okay. Okay, so Narendra says that for enterprise user experience, we were really challenged to directly touch base with user community in terms of budget and timeline. So how you guide us to handle such cases as researchers, as research is the initial phase. Okay, let me rephrase your question, Narendra. What I understood is that you are interested in knowing ways of collecting data from users if they are distant from you, isn't it? Because you says that in an enterprise user experience kind of a setup where you are trying to develop user experience for enterprise platforms, you do not have a direct access with users community in terms of yeah, these are the constraints, budget and timeline. Okay, so I think that's where companies differ from each other. Okay. Some companies have onus of listening to users, and they devote time and money in order to listen to their users. While some others may have different priorities. There's nothing good or bad about it. It's just different companies have different priorities. Okay. Now, but again, once you look into your question, I think this question is I really appreciate you asking this because it's one of the real world practical situations. Okay, you need to imagine that when we are talking about user interviews, and we were saying, how do we get access to our users? We had different forms of those access. So at times, the company may have a dedicated user base, which help them, designing their product. So you can go for that, or at times you can hire a different company which lets you gain access with different users. So this is all about having access to users. But in your case, if you do not have access to users, maybe what you can do is you can look at documents which are either previously created or are in the process by a different group in the same company, which are going to tell you a bit about your users. then that would be a helpful situation. But if it's too much constrained about the budget and timeline, then it is just the priority of the company. Okay. So once again, different companies have different priorities, and they have different focus in terms of what they want to do. Okay, so Jitu is saying that he got doubt about the model of exam questions. It is directly from the notes. Jitu, I think you should go for the this NPTEL course page. There, when we are talking about the certification part, we have listed out how we are going to do that. So under the certification, I think there are a few points which are listed. Please go through those points. Okay, let me look at other questions. Even Abhinav, when you're talking about exam pattern, please go to the certification information on the course page. There are a few points which talk about the exam pattern. So Vishal says that I'm a lead designer working in a service-based organization. My role involves talking to customer and making them aware about UX design and break their. Okay. Yeah, thanks for your comment. I don't see any question there, so I'm sorry about that. But I think thanks for informing us that you come from a industry and you are dealing with it practically on a very day-to-day basis. Thanks for your comment, Vishal. These customers always come with the timeline of 1816 to build and validate their. Would you suggest a better way to get a buy-in for UX process? I think, Vishal, this is, again, it is about the priority of the company. And there is no straightforward answer for this because there are a lot of things which are in play here. It is about what kind of product are you developing? That's the first thing. Then what is the requirement from the client? That's the next thing, right? And do you have that much of budget and timeline? So there are a lot of variables in place. I think it's important to, even if I want to comment, I want to have a sense of those variables first. So you are giving me a sense of the timeline, which is 8 to 16 weeks, but I think there are different other variables. It is about, once again, priorities of the companies, priorities of the client, and who is responsible for what part of the job. I think that's an important consideration. So I would suggest maybe you are doing a very important task that you are trying to inform your users about, inform the clients about the user experience design process and trying to break their stereotypes. I would count as a very, very interesting task to do. So usually, even a company evolves, right? So some of the people that I'm aware of, they work with the company, and then they evolve as individuals in that company, and also the company evolve. Okay, so once you are into the process and you make your point that people need to be aware about the UX design practices and processes, then maybe your company evolves, and then clients are also informed about it. So I think it's a lot about how do we manage our client. Okay, so I would leave it to you, but I would really appreciate that you are bringing such a real-world knowledge to us. Okay, so Jitu says that he found the learnings from interaction design course useful for his project. So maybe Jitu, I wish you best of all for your project. What you could do if you can, while we are answering and listening to others in this live chat session, you can just write a brief about your project. That would be helpful for all of us to know. Okay, so I would encourage you to please write 4-line brief of that project for us. We would really like to see what you are doing. And okay, let me handle the other questions now. Okay, thank you, Barkha. Thank you. I appreciate. Okay, now we have Tanvi. she's saying that interaction design need not always include screens and wireframes or any digital platforms. Okay, this is a very, very interesting question. A question that I have encountered so many times in my classes. Because you can imagine that we belong to a design school, and we have students from furniture design, from film and video, from product design, from graphic design, and then from interaction design. And this is a very interesting question, because they ask always, all the time, that what different am I doing in an interaction design course? Okay, so I really appreciate that you are bringing that question again. And that's where I want you to come back to the first session. I think that was first few sessions in the first week, where we were talking about what is interaction design. Okay, so if you can remember, one of the definitions was saying that it is about the computationally empowered interactive artifact. Okay, so this particular phrase, computationally empowered, okay, means that there has to be some computational capability in the design. And that would define, in fact, I would like to begin with that note, that would kind of define what interaction design include. Okay. So yes, I am in part agreement with your first half of the question, which is that is it just about screens? No, it is not just about screens, right? You have seen that we follow a very rigorous goal-directed design process, and we do research, we do modeling, and in fact, that's the whole point of going through this course, that it is not just about the screens and wireframes, right? But yes, the other part, half of the question that you have, that yes, it is largely about digital platforms, and to be specific, computationally empowered interactive artifacts. Okay, so I agree in part with the first half of your question, but maybe in the next half of the question, we need to revisit the interaction design sessions in the first week. Okay, because that's where we are defining what is interaction design, or rather we are looking at different perspectives which define interaction design. Okay. Now Arun says that how the information architecture and information structure different. Arun, I don't think that they are too different. Okay. Information architecture is it's a more accepted term, right, across industry, because we have job profiles which are like information architects, while there is no job profile like information structurist. Okay, so in that sense, these are just two different terms, but what they essentially mean is how do you organize your data, form categories, so that they are meaningfully presented before the users. Okay, so I would like to entertain that question in that sense, that these are two different terms. The first one is highly accepted as a job profile, and so we hear more about it, while the second one is more about content oriented. Okay. Okay, so now we can let me look at the other question. Okay, so how can we do useful user research with social media? Okay, well, that's a very specific question, Shujan, and I'm sure you may have some project on that. So we would like to know more details of that project, then we can answer that question. Okay, because social media, it's a very generic term. Too many things are involved. Okay, and I'm not sure how do we handle it without knowing the details of that question. So if you have time, please go through. Please do write details of this question. Narendra Kumar. Okay, can you suggest some of the best supporting tools to do user research, understanding user behavior? Okay, I'm aware that there, like when we do user research, pretty much academically, we have different tools that helps us organize data and do content analysis. So There are certain tools like Atlas TI and different other tools on this line which help you structure your data. But essentially, I think tools, when you say supporting tools, you may be required to create questionnaires, because questionnaires are also tools in one way. They help you collect data. Okay, so I don't think that there is a very specific tool to begin with, but of course, if you were to do content analysis, there are a lot of online tools. Some of them are open source as well. So please explore that part. Vishal, in the goal-directed design process, the goal we are talking about user goal or business goal. I don't think we have a binary in question, right? We do not. We are not really saying this or that. We are saying that we have to listen to stakeholders. We have to listen to subject matter experts, and we have to listen to users. And that is where the task of designing interactive product is a very challenging task, right? Because you have to strike out a balance. So it's not really, we're not talking about binaries, this or that. We are talking about inclusion of different people. Okay, stakeholders, subject matter experts, and users. Yeah, users are waiting to be included. As one of our Hangout participants has already mentioned that they are not even in a position to secure access to users. So you can very well imagine that in their case, users are actually waiting to be included in the process, but they have no access to. So I don't think we are answering, or we are interested in looking at boundaries. We are interested in looking at inclusion. So it's not just about the user goal or business goal. I would say include stakeholders, relevant people, and users in the process and their goals. So in these 4 weeks, Vishal says that we have covered the interaction models. Would you provide some example of generative power? Okay. So, so if you see, one of the interaction model that we discussed was windows, icons, menus, and pointers. And this interaction model is pretty much consistent across so many years. But you can see that it's within these very basic elements of windows, icons, menus, and pointers, we can create so many different interfaces. Okay, so if you look at the generative power is essentially the same. Whether the interaction model has the ability to let you be creative, to let you generate possibilities of all different kinds. Okay, so in that sense, I think WIMP is a very good example, because we see all different interfaces just out of the same interaction model. Or maybe we should say this is one of the most dominant interaction models across all different interfaces. So generative power is about whether the interaction model has the ability to let you, and when I say you, it is the people who are designing or who are involved in the design and development of the interactive product. So whether the interactive product has the ability to let some of these people imagine interfaces of all different kinds. That is what the generative power. Okay, I think Siddharth is asking the same question again. He's saying, why interaction design is computationally empowered, interaction with the product should also comes in. I think product and interaction design go hand in hand. I think that's you can keep that opinion. I have, but we have seen different perspectives, and these are organizations which are saying about interaction design, right? So, and these are people who have authority in that discipline. They are saying about interaction design. So I would not discourage you to think further in this direction, because you might come up with something new, and that's totally fine. But do look at references, because these references come from very established sources. Okay, how does UbiComp work? How is it implemented, its future scope? Okay, so I think that is pretty much covered in that session on interaction models, right? Because if you see, not just UbiComp, we have understood influences of this interaction model also. And within UbiComp, we have seen that how initially it was proposed as uh, as constituents of what do you say, tabs, pads, and boards, right? And these were different class of devices. So tabs were 6 inches or smaller, boards were a feet and smaller, and sorry, the pads were a feet and smaller, and boards were a yard and smaller. So we were definitely looking at um, inch size, inch class devices, foot class devices, and yard class devices. Okay, and we have seen that how these devices have evolved, right? Uh, in fact, when you are doing this live session, some of you may be using a foot class device like a iPad or an Android tablet. Like that's a foot class device. So I think interaction design in that sense is evolving all the time. But there is a very interesting question that people are asking. Okay, and I'm thankful that you brought that question up, because that question we need to understand in the light of UbiComp. Okay, if you remember, UbiComp is essentially about, it is talking that it is the third paradigm. Okay, the first one was when so many users use a single computer, which is the earliest known use of computer, right? You have a mainframe or a big computer with so much of hardware, and there are different users which are using that computer. Okay, then the second paradigm comes, which is about you have personal computing. So I have a computer in front of me, which is my personal computer, and it is through this personal computer that I am interacting with you. And this personal computer is pretty much capable of doing calculations and so many of these things, right? So that was the personal computing, and then comes the third paradigm, which is the UbiComp. Okay, so in that slide, I remember that we have very much, in clarity, we have specified that it is also known as the third paradigm. And this paradigm is about when users, a lot of them, use hundreds of these devices, right? And these devices are indispensable in the sense that we don't really need to own them, right? Like we use our computer, own our computers these days, right? We own a tablet. So in terms of coming to inch class device or foot class device or interactive boards, which are like a yard class device, we have reached very close to Ubiquitous computing. But are these devices still? Can you leave them out in the environment? No, you cannot, because these devices are still very costly, or at least some of them are. So this idea of UbiComp, which included a sub idea, which included another concept in between, that all these devices can be thrown back into the environment. Okay, and then the users goes on and keep using them. Once he is done using them, he can throw them back into the environment. That particular part, I think we are yet to achieve. Okay, so maybe in the next few decades we could do that. I'm not sure. Computing is getting cheaper and cheaper. Maybe we could do that, and especially with Internet of Things, maybe that is a very near future as well. Okay, so, and that is where I think I'm very thankful to you that you brought up a question on interaction paradigm. Okay, because the very idea that we have interaction paradigm is to enable us to think about the next set of interactions, right? Um, Interaction models are specific and objective, but interaction paradigms, they are meant to let you imagine the next set of interactions. Okay, so I'm very thankful that you brought up a question on interaction paradigm. Okay, now let me take up the question again. Okay, Vinu, can you please explain about aesthetics like using color into web design? Is there any restriction in bringing too many colors? I think that is a matter of that is definitely a matter of visual design. If you are a visual designer, let me talk about the later half of the question. Is there a restriction in bringing in too many colors? So if you are a graphic designer, you would essentially have a class on harmony, rhythm, and balance, right? These are the foundational courses in graphic design. And students, when they undertake these courses, they try to understand what brings harmony in a visual design, what brings balance in a visual design, what brings rhythm in a visual design. Not just this, even students in the second year in a design school, they go through some of the psychological principles like Gestalt, okay, which talks about how do you compose a particular scene or a particular visual design. So I think you need to go through these things first before you understand or answer that question. As a visual designer, if you want to pursue that as a career or something, some expertise you want to gain in that area, I strongly encourage you to look into what is harmony, what is rhythm, what is balance, what are these Gestalt laws, what are color combinations, what are primary colors, secondary colors, complementary colors, right? Get a sense of what these things are, okay? Because it's not really, there is no prescription for it. Understand that, right? There is a knowledge that precedes any decision, even in a visual design framework, okay? And that knowledge I have mentioned is about harmony, rhythm, balance, Gestalt, and so many other things. And students in a design school typically take 4 years to master some of these or get a sense of some of these skills. So yeah, learning is open to you, and a course on interaction design may open up opportunities for you to take up further courses in visual design. I wish you best of all. Then we have Manjunath. Okay. Manjunath, you mentioned conceptual framework. What do you mean by that? We did not use anything like that in our instruction material. Okay, we had interaction framework, we had visual design, and then we have industrial design framework. So maybe in the chat you can mention more about that, and then we'll take your question. Sagar. Sagar, I think one of the students has mentioned that he is using his this learning in a particular project of him. Maybe you can connect with him and you can both collaborate and connect with each other. Maybe this is a little outside the scope of the course. We really cannot give you assignment other than the ones that are already present on the website. Okay. But if you think you have a very specific query and you have some project, you can anytime write back to me, and I would be happy to answer some of that question. But be specific that what kind of project you have, who is commissioning that project to you, what are their requirements and what are their expectations, and how you yourself are dealing with that project. Okay. So if that is there, I think we can connect back at any point of time. Okay. Right. Okay, Deepali asked another question. She is asking that. Um, I think she is referring to color. Deepali, are you referring to color? Or what are you referring to when you say, yes, sir, it's a visual requirement? I'm not getting what do you mean by it? What is the reference for it? Okay. Okay, let me, Siddharth. Siddharth, I think we have pretty much used references, right? So if you see different slides in the course, there's a small text line which is appearing, and which I have tried to make as distinct as possible so that you can notice it very well. That line says about the book that you should be considering. Okay, and also in the introductory session, we have listed 4 different books. Okay, so maybe you can look into these particular things. Okay, look into the references which are mentioned in every slide. And there are some very interesting books, definitely. So, how much time do we have? Okay. Let me see if any question is still unanswered, because I think we had one, or maybe there is a question which is unanswered. Okay, yeah. Okay, so we have Vishal who was wondering, if there are examples for pervasive computing. And okay, and then we have Narendra Kumar. He's saying that as an interaction where we can take product design to adopt. Okay, so let me take Narendra question first, then I'll come to the Vishal question. Okay, Narendra, I think you are asking for reference on product design, right? Okay, or let me be a little more specific. Once again, we have studied 3 different frameworks in this course: interaction framework, visual design framework, and the product design framework. Fine. What I understood from your question is that you are saying that is there a reference for product design framework? Okay. I think there is a parallel course ongoing within the design engineering category in NPTEL, which is about the product design. Okay, so I would strongly encourage you to look at that course videos. At least you can find them somewhere, and that course video, those course videos would be very relevant to the query that we have raised, because there my colleagues are trying to focus on product design aspect. That's something which I'm aware of. So I would strongly encourage you to look into the other course within the design engineering category offered by IIT Guwahati. Okay. Now coming on to Vishal question, that are there examples of pervasive computing? Okay. So Vishal, if you remember, we had mentioned pervasive computing as one of the influences of ubiquitous computing. Okay. And what this pervasive computing says that that computing resides in the environment, and it is almost invisible, right? So now, if you can imagine a lot of work around embedding computing in your clothing, like smart textiles, right? Smart homes, right? That qualifies most as very early examples of pervasive computing. Okay, these are paradigms. They give you people a direction to imagine interactions in a particular direction. Okay, so we have very initial examples which are coming in, but not really fully fledged examples. But IoTs as they develop, I think they would lead us to achieving some of these objectives of pervasive computing. So as an examples that you are asking, early examples could be smart textiles and smart home environments, right? So I would leave you with those examples as answer to your question. Okay. So maybe I'll, if you have more questions for me, I would be happy to answer. Oh, Vishal, thank you very much. Okay, so Narendra, Vishal, Deepali, Siddharth, and so many of you unknown to me and coming to for this live session. I'm so thankful for you because this is once again, this was the only opportunity I had to interact with you guys. So whosoever, Shrujan, Abhinav, Jitu, Barkha, Tanvi, Narendra, Vinod, all of you, wish you best of all. And I hope that this course was fun to you. And we had a learning session which were mutually engaging and interesting for us. Thank you very much.